Hey Night Riders, DisRegarding Henry here, and welcome to another edition of Unmade Masterpieces. I know it's taken me a while, but finally, here is part 2 of our look at Shane Carruth's A Topiary. A brief recap. This script is separated into 2 acts. In part 1, I summarized Act 1, following Acre Stowe. I left off at the beginning of Act 2, when we abandoned Acre and his story to follow a group of 10 boys. In the opening scene of this new story, we see one boy, Euclid, emerge from a forest carrying a machine roughly the size of a car muffler called the Maker. How it got there, its exact origins, will remain a mystery. Act 1, in its extraordinary originality and complexity, was very difficult for me to properly summarize. Act 2 will be even more challenging, the first reason for that being length. Act 1 was only about 60 pages long. Act 2 is nearly 200. Secondly, it involves many more characters. Act 1 more or less revolved entirely around Acre. As long as I could follow what he was doing, I could understand most of what took place in Act 1. For Act 2, all 10 of these boys play an essential role. You have to be able to keep track of all of them, and Carruth obviously put a great deal of work into giving each boy a distinct personality, layering their relationships in believable and nuanced ways. When I read this script the first time, I found it impossible to keep track of everyone. The second time it was easier because I was more familiar with it, but it was still fairly demanding, and I don't think that's the fault of the script. It's not that it's poorly written, it's very well written, but it's a script. It's not a finished story. It's lacking the visuals. This was meant to be a movie after all. I think Carruth was relying on that a great deal. Keeping track of faces on a screen is much easier than keeping track of names on a page. Lastly, the way this story is structured, the way it plays out and reveals information to you, the process of discovery that it portrays, can't be replicated in a summary. Carruth, one of the things he does best is reveal astonishingly complex stories to us one little piece at a time. That was the thing that hooked me so deeply into Primer. It's not about a couple of guys that just build a time machine. It's 2 guys that start out building something else, accidentally create something different, gradually come to realize what they have actually invented, slowly discover its mechanics and how to exploit it, then slowly discover the consequences that result from that. I'd never seen a story quite like it before. A Topiary is the same way. The characters start out like us. We know nothing. The first discovery is made, that leads to another discovery, and again, and what Carruth has done with this script is create a mystery that is so exciting, so utterly enthralling, that has so many parts and no solution. We go on this journey with the characters, with Acre in the first act, and now these boys in the second act, where we are always discovering something new and being led right into the next little piece of the mystery. We become obsessed with it. But is there an end? Is there really a solution? In a sense, yes, but it leaves much up to interpretation, as we'll find out. I'll do my best to capture as much of that process as I can, but to get the full effect, you do need to actually read the script for yourself. As a suggestion for Carruth, this story is so damn interesting, I think it could work as a novel. If he could just tweak its format a little bit, he could publish this as a novel, and it would be great. And if it became a bestseller, he might be able to finance the movie that way. It could become a whole series. Imagine that. The script also contains many interesting directions for the blocking and staging of scenes, unusual things that the camera would have done. Many scenes are linked together in visual ways with match cuts. A character will, say, reach for something off screen at the end of one scene, and that will match cut with the beginning of the next scene where another character grabs something. That's just one example. It also appears the film was to feature a lot of interesting sound experiments. There are some sequences designed entirely around sound, similar to what Carruth did end up doing on Upstream Color. I'm guessing a lot of the visual and aural techniques Carruth used in that film originated as ideas for A Topiary, so we can at least have a better idea of what this film might have looked and sounded like. I won't be including these details in my summary since it would just take too long, but there's some really interesting stuff there too. Anyway, without further ado, let's get to the actual story. Act 2 follows 10 boys of varying ages from 7 to 12 who live in a slightly run-down rural community, I'm guessing somewhere in the South. They run their own little landscaping business where they mow neighbors' lawns, prune bushes, in the winter they shovel driveways, they have a small tractor they use to haul equipment around. It earns them a nice amount of cash that they split between them. They spend most of their free time at an abandoned construction site near their homes, playing around in the skeletons of half-finished houses and buildings. There's even some deserted machinery, and one structure that is basically just a bottomless concrete pit that they throw things into. All of this will become important later. Euclid, the boy you might call the main character of Act 2, discovers the maker in the opening scene. He takes it home and is messing around with it before going to bed that night. It's basically a crude rectangular box with a handle at one end and a button on the end of that. After a bit of poking and prodding, Euclid discovers a tray that ejects from the maker. It's empty, so he pushes it back in and goes to sleep. The next morning, he discovers the tray has ejected itself during the night and now contains a disc-like object about 3 inches thick called a funnel. He removes the funnel, pushes the tray back in, plays around with the button and handle until he figures out how the machine works and resets it. After a few minutes, the tray pops out again with another funnel. Only this one is completely flat. He makes a few more funnels throughout the day and discovers that they start out flat when they come out of the maker and after a while expand to their full shape, like a muffin rising in an oven. Euclid shows his friends the funnels, and they begin exchanging the maker amongst themselves until each of the boys has a supply of a few funnels. At first, they don't have much use for them. They toss them around like frisbees, play horseshoes with them, until Euclid finds a way to fit them together. The funnels can be built into stacks, one on top of the other. They don't lay perfectly flat, each has about a half-inch gap of empty space between the next one, but it's somehow still connected. No matter what the boys do, they can't collapse the stacks, nor can they separate the funnels once they are connected. The maker then produces another object. The boys mistake it for another funnel, but this one never expands, it remains flat, and has a brownish stripe through it. This is a controller. It can be used to collapse the stacks. However, once they do collapse, they expand again almost instantly, which typically causes them to launch high into the air. The boys then make a game of it. They all build their own stacks and have competitions to see who can launch theirs the farthest. And then they make a giant target to see who can land theirs closest to the center. This continues for some time. We begin to get a feel for their relationships. Euclid is very close to Carter. They like to conspire together. Carter is older, but looks up to Euclid as a leader. The other boys consider him the smartest of the group, which inspires a bit of jealousy in a few of them. They start to experiment with the funnels, testing their strength. They want to see if one can actually be broken. Nothing seems to work until they tie chains to a fresh one right out of the maker, connect one chain to an old crane in the abandoned construction yard, and the other chain to their tractor. The funnel actually holds up under the strain for a while. They gun the tractor as hard as they can. Every boy grabs hold of the chain and pulls with all his strength, and finally, they succeed in breaking a funnel. It produces a deafening sound, literally. It causes every one of them to go deaf. Like everything else that happens to them over the course of this story, they decide to keep this a secret from their parents, which is rather tricky and leads to some humorous scenes. And I should mention that we rarely ever see any parents or adults in this story. Every time they do show up, it's a little bit of a shock. These boys seem so isolated and live most of the time in this incredible world of their own. So it's always surprising when they're actually forced to deal with real everyday problems like school or bedtimes. After a day or two, their hearing returns, but the broken pieces of the funnel are producing intense heat. So intense, it boils away any moisture in a 30-yard radius. The boys get rid of the broken pieces by scooping them up in a large flag tied to some ropes, dragging them to the bottomless concrete pit, and tossing them into its dark depths. Not long after that, several more discoveries are made. One, the controllers can be programmed. at first with simple voice commands, but over time each controller appears to develop a kind of telepathic link with the boy operating it, and is able to anticipate his thoughts. Second, the funnels decay. After a stack is launched a few times, the funnels begin to turn brown and break apart. This doesn't really present a problem because the decayed funnels can be removed from the stacks and replaced with new ones, and the maker appears to be an inexhaustible resource for the things. It just keeps spitting out a never-ending supply. But new objects are revealed inside the decayed funnels, small arc-like devices in groups of 4 called petals. The boys figured out the funnels fit together, so naturally the petals must fit together in some way too. It's just a matter of who solves the mystery first. During this time, we see that some fracturing has begun in the group. One boy, Marcus, was the first to discover the petals, but he didn't tell anybody about them. He wanted to be the first to figure out what they do. Euclid and Carter resent this a little bit. Now everybody begins experimenting with the petals. They do fit together in certain ways, but none of the boys can seem to figure out what they are supposed to build from them. While tackling this mystery, something unexpected happens. The maker runs out of fuel. It apparently does have a finite amount of resources it uses to create funnels, and now it's empty. The funnels begin to become precious commodities. The boys begin using their landscaping money to purchase each other's extra funnels. After all, once these break, there won't be any more. One boy, Albert, tests different materials as fuel. The maker has a grate built into the top of it, and Albert tries pouring in soil, flour, rice, even cereal, but nothing seems to work. The rest of the boys put all of their energy into discovering the purpose of the petals. Euclid finally cracks it. He combines a few dozen petals into a more complex device that is described in the script as a cylindrical object that looks like a kind of bicycle wheel, with spokes in the center. It is called a flower. The flowers are able to slide into each other and create stacks that expand and compress, similar to the funnels, only these can't be launched. They serve another purpose, which the boys have yet to discover. At the same time, Albert figures out what the maker eats, but he won't tell anybody. Now the group is really starting to break apart, with Albert using his knowledge of the maker's fuel source as leverage to get more funnels than everybody else, and then selling them. The boys start breaking into 2 separate camps, those that follow Albert and those that follow Euclid. They start fighting and arguing more. That's when another boy, Javier, reveals his big discovery. The flowers can be used as limbs. He gives a demonstration where he attaches 4 flower stacks to a wooden stool and is able to command it to walk across the room. The other boys are stunned. They copy Javier's design and begin creating creatures, a form of artificial life, using the flower limbs. These creatures are called choruses. A competition begins between Albert's group and Euclid's group to see who can build the first fully functioning chorus. Only this competition isn't as friendly as the previous ones. The boys are nearly becoming hostile towards each other. Albert's group builds a chorus about the size of a dog with a plywood box for a body. They are able to teach it to run, but it is completely unable to keep its balance and falls over constantly. Euclid's group creates a chorus about the size of a horse with a mahogany chest for a body, and they try to focus on simply teaching it to balance. Progress is slow for both groups. Some more experimenting with the petals reveals that they can also be used to create knee joints. Once these are added, Euclid's chorus is able to perfectly balance, but it can't run. It can't even walk. Neither group is able to make any more progress. Euclid follows Albert home one day and discovers the maker's fuel source, sawdust. But he doesn't want any more fighting. He allows Albert to keep his secret. Begrudgingly, they all agree to once again work together as a whole. With their combined effort, they are able to create their first fully functioning chorus. It behaves like an intelligent animal. It is able to observe and react to its environment. It can learn and adapt. It recognizes its creators and plays games with them like a pet. The boys build a makeshift corral to keep the chorus in overnight, and when they return the next morning, it's gone. After searching the woods briefly, they find it near a tree, using its legs to punch imprints in the ground and on the bark of the tree. Out of these imprints are growing what looks like white coral. The script refers to this activity as farming. The boys don't know why the chorus is doing this, but decide to allow it to continue and begin work on their second chorus. Almost immediately after this one is finished, it too is compelled to begin farming. The boys try to prevent the choruses from doing this, but it is an irrepressible urge they have. The white coral grows higher and creates a small enclosure. When the boys break it open, they discover the purpose of the chorus's farming. Inside the coral formation is a hexagonal cone-shaped device called a frond. Like the maker, it produces smaller devices out of an opening at one end called starbursts, which are basically star shapes with 8 points. Like the funnels, they emerge from the frond completely flat and rise over time to about an inch thick. What the boys don't understand is why this frond is perfectly white and symmetrical with no handles or buttons or trays, and the maker is this rough, black, battered machine. Upon closer examination, they discover that the maker can be opened, and inside they discover a frond, exactly like the one the choruses just farmed, except the opening at the end of this one is disc-shaped, like the funnels, and the opening on the new frond is shaped like the 8-point starburst. The casing that held the frond, called the governor, is man-made, leading the boys to wonder who built it and why. They are also confused as to its design. Once the frond is out of the governor, it is always active. It will just continue to produce funnels without stopping until it runs out of fuel, which the boys find much more convenient. The purpose of the governor is actually to prevent the frond from producing funnels. They don't understand why someone would design a machine like that. Experimenting begins to discover the purpose of the starbursts. Very quickly, they ascertain that the starbursts connect with the flowers and create a kind of hand, although an 8-fingered hand. The boys attempt to teach the choruses how to use these hands, but can't manage to figure out how to work with 8 fingers. So, one boy, George, volunteers to cut off 3 of the fingers. He uses a bandsaw, and even observing from a great distance away, the other boys can hear the massive booms that accompany the removing of each finger. George, of course, loses his hearing. They also have to deal with the problem of the heat generated by the broken pieces. The starbursts themselves turn out not to be a problem, since they appear to stop producing the intense heat once they are connected with the flowers. But the broken fingers are still dangerous. They dispose of these in the same way as the broken funnel, tossing them down the concrete pit. George makes a pair of workable hands for one chorus, and as a result, permanently loses his hearing. But now, the hands work. The choruses take the next step in their evolution. They've also begun learning, adapting. Before they can even alter the hands for the second chorus, the 3 extra fingers fall off on their own. Not long after this, both choruses go missing. Again. The boys are unable to find them until Euclid and Carter are one night examining the pieces of a broken funnel. Euclid takes a small bite off one of the pieces and goes into some kind of trance. While in this trance, he gets a hold of a paper cup, bites open one of his own fingers, and draws a picture on the cup in his own blood. When he wakes up, Carter shows him the cup, and he sees that he drew a view of a horizon. The boys look for the place with that specific view, and there they find the choruses. Again, they are farming. While the other boys are dealing with the choruses, Carter and Euclid discover another frond. They discuss what to do with it, and, concerned that they are beginning to lose control of the choruses, decide to hide it. Albert then discovers a new fuel source for the fronds, the pieces of the broken funnels. The fronds begin producing funnels and starbursts even faster, and the choruses seem aware of this. They begin collecting every funnel the boys discarded before they discovered the petals. The boys try to regain control of them, but they have stopped listening. Javier ends up with a broken arm after trying to stop one chorus from going out to hunt for more funnels. The boys are starting to get scared. Then, the unthinkable happens. One of the boys, months ago, gave a girl he liked a funnel as a gift. She put it on her charm necklace. The chorus finds this girl, and while retrieving the funnel with no concern for her safety, kills her. The boys, especially Euclid, are devastated. They then trap the choruses, dismantle them, and dispose of the pieces down the concrete pit, along with the fronds. As far as Euclid is concerned, that is that. But it's not the end. We've still got a bit more to go. This video has ended up being longer than I planned, so I'm going to end it right here, and we're going to finish this up in part 3. This has been Unmade Masterpieces with DisRegarding Henry. Please like the video or leave a comment if you want to see more, maybe even leave a suggestion for a future episode, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.